Second reading. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that the bill be now read a second time. Madam Deputy Speaker, the purpose of this bill is to strengthen UK border security, which has been weakened and undermined in recent years, to restore order to the immigration and asylum systems that were left in chaos, and to bring in new counter-terror style powers for our law enforcement to go after the dangerous criminal gangs who undermine our border security and profit from putting lives at risk and who have been getting away with it for far too long. It's a bill to strengthen leadership and accountability around our borders, putting the Border Security Command on the statute book, to bring in tougher powers to tackle organised immigration crime, including pursuing those involved in supply chains, preparatory acts and seizing mobile phones, and a bill that allows us to take stronger action on those who put the lives of others at risk at sea, to improve intelligence gathering and sharing, to restore order and control to the asylum system so we can clear the backlog, to deliver on our Labour manifesto commitment to bring in counter-terrorism-style powers to increase enforcement and returns, and part of the programme to deliver what we set out before Christmas in the government's plan for change, rebuilding secure borders, restoring order, control and confidence to the immigration and asylum systems, and bringing legal and illegal migration down. I will allow the amendment.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm very grateful to the Home Secretary, and she may recall that when she sat on this side of the House, that I cautioned the last government that the actions they were going to take were unsustainable if they wished to have a uniform immigration policy throughout the United Kingdom. And more particularly in the illegal migration bill, I warned that it would conflict with the Windsor Framework. They said I was wrong, but the High Court in Belfast has said that we were correct. So on the steps that she's taking today in repealing both sections of the Illegal Migration Act and indeed the Safety of Rwanda Act as well, can she confirm as Home Secretary of this United Kingdom that our immigration policy will run throughout the entirety of this United Kingdom?
The honourable member makes an important point. I can assure him that our approach to both immigration and to asylum is for these to apply right across the UK and to recognise the importance of that and the importance of our border security as part of that UK-wide approach. Because most people across the UK want to see strong border security and a properly controlled and managed asylum and immigration system. So the UK does its bit to help, alongside other countries, to help those fleeing persecution. I will give way in a second. But so that those with no right to be here are swiftly returned, and so the rules are respected and enforced. None of those things have been happening in recent years because when this government took office, basic rules had stopped being enforced, the asylum system had been crashed, and smuggling gangs saw the UK as an easy target. And the last Conservative government completely lost control of our borders. I will give way to the honourable member, but then I would just say to the House that I will take many interventions, but I will also need to make progress before I take too many interventions. So I'll take the intervention for the honourable member.
Fair enough, and I'm grateful to the Secretary of State for giving way. She talks about the whole of the UK and how much they want this bill. What my little part of the UK is experiencing is population stagnation with decline coming in the 2030s. What we want and need is the tools to address this. A Scottish visa that will help our nation, supported by every sector and every business organisation. When will we get that to help with our issues?
Well, let me just repeat the answer I've just given. Our immigration asylum system applies right across the UK, and I would say to him that when net migration soared over the period of the last government, that did not address the labour market issues in Scotland, and that's why what we need to do is have a proper strategy that addresses the labour market issues rather than just seeing migration always as the answer. The last Conservative government completely lost control of our borders. Net migration quadrupled in the space of 3 years to a record high of nearly 1 million people as overseas recruitment soared while training was cut in the UK. Immigration is important for the UK, but that is why it needs to be controlled and managed. And the party that told people they were taking back control of our borders instead just ripped all the controls up. 6 years ago, barely a handful of boats crossed the Channel. 300 people arrived by small boats in 2018. Within 4 years, that had risen to more than 30,000, a 100-fold increase, not just undermining our border security, but putting huge numbers of lives at risk. And the government failed to act fast with France and other countries to increase enforcement or to prevent the gangs taking hold. And instead, criminals were let off, and an entire criminal industry was established along our borders in just a few short years, with tragic consequences. I give way to the honourable member.
Thank you for giving way. I'm most grateful to her. Nobody in this House supports criminal gangs. Nobody in this House supports people smugglers. We recognise that there are some grotesque people exploiting people who are in a very vulnerable situation. But would she agree with me that those people that are getting on those boats are themselves desperate? Many are victims of wars. Many are victims of the most grotesque abuses of human rights, and people who themselves deserve to be treated with some respect. And so, by way of balance, should we not be working out a more sustainable route of safe routes for asylum seekers, safe routes for people to gain a place of safety, and recognise the massive contribution that many of these people will make to our community, our country and our society?
Well, the UK must always do its bit to help those who fled persecution. That's what we have done with Ukraine, with Afghanistan, and that will continue to be important. But no one should be making this dangerous journey on a boat across the Channel and being exploited by the criminal gangs who are profiting huge amounts of money, hundreds of millions of pounds they are making from putting lives at risk and from undermining our border security, because frankly it should be governments, not gangs, that decide who enters our country. And at the same time, under the last government, asylum decision-making collapsed, a 70% drop in monthly decision-making in the run-up to the election, an 80% drop in asylum interviews. The entire asylum system crashed by their chaotic legislation, driving the backlog up at huge cost to the taxpayer. And enforcement undermined, a 34% drop in returns compared to the last Labour government. Just 4 employers charged with illegally employing migrant workers in the space of 2.5 years. And of course, £700 million spent sending 4 volunteers to Rwanda. A programme that ran for more than 2 years and sent just 4 volunteers. We said, Madam Speaker, at the time, my Deputy Speaker at the time, we said at the time, frankly, it would have been cheaper to send those same people on a round trip to Australia on the former Prime Minister's private helicopter. It turns out it would have been cheaper to buy each of them a fleet of private helicopters themselves. Never mind, frankly, spending the money on paying for thousands more doctors, more nurses or police officers, or paying to boost our border security instead. So we said in our manifesto that we would stop the chaos, return order to the system. That's what this bill does, and that's exactly what we're doing. Since the election, we've started by ensuring rules are respected and enforced, because immigration is important, but the system should not be misused or abused. So we have transferred staff and resources from the failed Rwanda scheme and boosted returns and enforcement. The result is a 24% increase in enforced returns in the first 7 months for those who have no right to be in the UK. 19,000 people returned by the end of last month, including the 4 largest return charter flights in our country's history, and a 38% increase in illegal working raids and arrests compared to the same time period under the previous government. New biometric kits rolled out so immigration enforcement can check fingerprints and biometric residence permits on the spot, and already increasing the approach to prosecuting employers for exploitation and employment of illegal workers. I will give way to the honourable member.
I thank her for giving way. Of those that have been deported since she came into office, can she tell the House how many had crossed into the UK on a small boat?
Well, I should perhaps point her to her own government's record, which us with a shocking and disgraceful backlog in the asylum system. We are now clearing that backlog so that small boat cases can now be returned, something that wasn't possible under her government's approach because, frankly, they never decided any asylum cases, and as a result, they couldn't even return anyone who arrived on small boat because their system was so broken. So not only is this government actually introducing the stronger powers to prevent small boats arriving in the first place, something that, shockingly, the party opposite seems to want to vote against this evening, shockingly, but we're also clearing the backlog so that we can return people and so that we can substantially increase returns compared to the total failure under the previous government. Madam Deputy Speaker, we've established our new Border Security Command to draw together the work of the Border Force, the National Crime Agency, the Police, Immigration Enforcement, the Foreign Office, the Intelligence and Security Agencies to strengthen our borders, backed by £150 million of funding for new technology and hundreds of specialist investigators, leading already to major joint operations with Belgium, France, Germany, Bulgaria and Iraq, taking out smuggler gang leaders and supply chains, because the criminals operate across borders, and so must we. And since the election, we have signed new agreements with Germany, Iraq, Italy, the Calais Group and G7, and we're drawing up new closer arrangements with France. And in parallel with our new UK Border Security Command, the French Interior Minister has announced increased enforcement along the coast and a new Criminal Intelligence and Investigations Unit to drive new action against organised immigration crime. But we need to go much further. And it's worth understanding how extensive and how vile this criminal industry really is, because it operates from the money markets of Kabul to the hills of Kurdistan, right across Europe, through the Western Balkans, across the Mediterranean, false advertising on social media, hawala networks to channel the cash, huge supply chains of flimsy boats, weak engines, fake life jackets that wouldn't keep anyone afloat, shipping routes through Bulgaria, through Italy, through Spain, warehouses of boats in Germany, organised logistics networks through Belgium and northern France, and gangs that have become increasingly violent in their determination to make as much money as possible, crowding more and more people into flimsy boats, with women and children put in the middle, so that if the boats fold or sink, they are the first to be crushed or to be drowned. And they provide the fuel in flimsy containers which leak, so when they mix with the salt water, they inflict the most horrific burns. And the gang's latest tactic is to make people wait in freezing cold water, even in January, until a boat arrives from further along the shore to pick them up. The International Organisation for Migration estimates that at least 78 people died while attempting to cross the Channel in 2024. Families left devastated by the loss of loved ones, victims of a diabolical trade, the most disgraceful and immoral trade in people. I will give way to my own friend.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for giving way, and my honourable friend will accept that this is a difficult time to speak up for a fair and ethical immigration policy, with the tides of far-right politics sweeping Europe and maybe even lapping on the shores of this country. But does she accept that she has a danger of sounding like she's trying to stigmatise desperate migrants rather than building a fair system?
Well, I know the Mother of the House has had a long interest in these issues and has often spoken on these issues. I think the issue I would say to her is we have to have a fair and effective asylum and immigration system. Those are really important to the UK. Immigration has always been an important part of the UK. But in order for that to be so, the rules need to be respected and enforced. And we cannot allow the criminal gangs to end up putting lives at risk in this way or to undermine our border security. And it is a result of the operations of those criminal gangs that 78 people have died while attempting to cross the Channel in 2024. And the way we have seen these quite horrific tactics. I will give way to the honourable member.
I thank the Secretary of State for giving way. She's describing very clearly the grotesque way in which evil people traffickers encourage people to come across the Channel. One of the things my constituents find it really difficult to understand is why people want to come from France, a lovely country that many enjoy holidaying in, that is so safe, across the Channel. What does she understand as to why people make the journey across the Channel, and how will this bill specifically help to reduce the number who do so?
Well, she will know, or she should know, for many years this has been increasing. This challenge has been escalating for 6 years. We have seen this huge increase in the boats crossing. And underpinning the huge increase has been the development of a criminal industry. So back in 2018, there were just barely a handful of boat crossings before that. And now this entire criminal industry has developed. It's based on false advertising, it's based on marketing, it's based on also being able to promise people the ability to work illegally. And that is why the previous government's complete failure to take action, enforcement action around illegal working, to make sure that there were the proper systems in place to put returns into place, has also been deeply damaging as well. What the bill does is to provide statutory underpinning for the new Border Security Command. For too long, different agencies with responsibility for border security have been operating in silos without clear strategy or direction. But criminals can exploit that fragmentation. So the new Border Security Command we established last summer is drawing together the work of different agencies: the Border Force, National Crime Agency, local police forces, HMRC, immigration enforcement, the intelligence and security agencies, and also, because strengthening our borders means working internationally, the work of the Foreign Office on border security too. Led by former Police Chief Martin Hewitt, the command is already having a real impact driving law enforcement cooperation across Europe and beyond. And by placing it on a statutory footing, securing its authority and direction, it means for the first time border security is being treated as the national security issue that it needs to be, engaging on the multiple challenges and threats we face around our borders. Second, the bill strengthens the powers law enforcement can use against ruthless and devious criminals. For too long, the ringleaders and facilitators of this wretched trade have been able to evade justice by ensuring that they're not present when the money changes hands or the boats set off. And that has to change. So, learning from the early intervention counter-terrorism powers, this bill will make possible much stronger early action against smuggler and trafficking gangs. New powers to better target the supply chains, making it an offence to organise the buying, selling and transporting of small boat parts, motors and engines to be used for illegal entry, not waiting until we can prove that the boats in question were actually used to arrive at Western Jet Foil. Making it an offence to organise the logistics or gather information for the purposes of organised immigration crime. Making clear this is targeting the criminal gangs profiting from trading in people, not those who help rescue others from serious danger or harm. And giving law enforcement the powers to seize and search mobile phones of those arriving on small boats to trace the gangs who organised their journey. As Rob Jones from the National Crime Agency has said, if you get effective legislation and you get concerted effort right across the system internationally, you can make a real difference. And that's why legislation like this is so important. Over the way to the Honourable Member.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank you to the Home Secretary for giving way. Can she tell us, I've asked her this question before and she hasn't answered it yet, can she tell us which metric we should use and by which date if we're to ascertain whether she succeeded in smashing the gangs?
Well, we've been clear as part of the plan for change that the purpose is to reduce illegal migration, to reduce boats crossing the Channel, because no one should be making these dangerous journeys across the Channel. And that is why we have to take these powers in order to be able to go after the gangs, powers that astonishingly he and his party seem to want to vote against tonight, voting against the action that we need, voting in favour of the criminal gangs, letting them off the hook once again. Madam Deputy Speaker, I am also deeply concerned about the growing violence and risk to life. In the last 12 months, we've seen a disturbing number of cases where the French authorities tried to rescue people from dangerously overcrowded boats, where people, including children, were being crushed to death.
Will my good friend give way on that point?
I will give way when I just finish this point. One such case was last April, when a 7-year-old girl died. But others on the boat refused rescue and remained on the boat to travel to the UK, even though people on that boat had died, even though many of them were complicit in the crushing and in putting lives at risk. We need to be able to take stronger action here in the UK. We need to be able to extradite people to return to France to face trial, but we also need powers here in the UK. So that is why a new offence of endangering life at sea is being introduced to send a clear message that we will take action on those who are complicit in the loss of life or risk to life at sea. Those involved in behaviour that puts others at risk of serious injury or death, such as physical aggression, intimidation, or rejecting rescue attempts, will face prosecution. I'll give way to my honourable friend.
I thank the Home Secretary for giving way. I support the intent of this bill in terms of reforming the asylum system and preventing further deaths in the Channel. The Prime Minister has formally promised to defend migrants and to develop a system based on compassion and dignity, and that can be resolved by looking at safe routes. People wouldn't put their lives on the line and put themselves in danger if there were safe routes. So can the Minister tell us what will be in this bill that supports safe routes?
Well, so to my honourable friend, the purpose of this bill is to pursue the criminal gangs who are undermining border security and who are putting lives at risk. Because unless we do that, any other measure that we take in any direction will be undermined and will fail, because that is the way that the criminal gangs work, and that is why this is so important. The UK must always do its bit, has always done its bit alongside other countries to help those fleeing persecution. That's what we've done, for example, and continue to do for Afghanistan. But we also have to ensure that governments, not gangs, choose who enters our country, and also that we prevent this criminal trade in people that is putting lives at risk. So the bill will also upgrade serious crime prevention orders, which are a potentially vital tool but are currently underused. Under new interim serious crime prevention orders, the process will be streamlined, so strict curbs can be placed on individuals suspected of involvement in organised immigration crime before they are prosecuted and convicted, which could, for example, mean restrictions placed on travel, social media access, or the subject's finances, so that early intervention can prevent dangerous action as well. I'll give way to the honourable member.
The Secretary of State has outlined many of the issues which has taken to try and deal with the gangs. But the fact is, people come here because there are advantages in coming here. What is she doing to ensure that those advantages are removed so that there's no incentive for people to come to the United Kingdom? And secondly, what role will the border agency have between Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic, since the Irish Republic is also a route for illegal immigrants to come into the United Kingdom?
Well, you will be aware that the common travel area has long been in place, and of course that means arrangements have to be addressed differently. But I would say to him, look, what part of the problem has been with our whole asylum and immigration system is that issues around enforcement have just not been taken seriously enough for far too long. We've been very clear, the rules need to be respected and enforced. That is why we have substantially increased the resources, the staffing available for enforcement and return. returns. It's why we have had 19,000 people returned. It's why we have increased returns, for example, increased enforcement returns by 24%. It's why we've also increased the illegal working raids by 38% just since the election, a substantial increase in the illegal working raids and arrests because not enough action was being taken around illegal working, around employers exploiting people. And actually, if we don't have that system of proper enforcement, then people do think it's just too easy to ignore the rules, to break the rules, to ignore the system. And that is what we have to turn around. There has to be some credibility underpinning the asylum and immigration system. There has to be some enforcement to the rules, which frankly there just hasn't been for far too long. Additionally, Madam Deputy Speaker, we will introduce 2 new offences to criminalise the making, adapting, importing, supplying and offering to supply and possession of a specified the list of articles for use in serious crime. That includes templates for 3D printed firearms, pill presses and vehicle concealment. Stronger powers to go after dangerous criminals who are planning small boats, supplying small boats, putting lives at risk, undermining border security and organising serious crime. But yet, I will.
I'm very grateful, and I know she is doing her best to cover the waterfront, almost literally, but isn't part of the problem that so many of the criminal gang organisers are outside our jurisdiction? So how will these new laws apply to people that we cannot reach?
The Honourable Member makes a really important point because we have to do this in coordination with other countries. So alongside the UK setting up the Border Security Command, France is setting up their new Organised Immigration Crime Unit as a new intelligence centre and strengthening enforcement too. Alongside the UK strengthening our law to be able to go after the preparatory supply chains met by the people smugglers, Germany is also committed as part of our new agreement with them to strengthen their law so that they can take action against the warehouses which we know hold huge numbers of the flimsy boats that are then used in the channel to transport people across the channel and to put lives at risk. So he's absolutely right, this has to be done in cooperation and coordination with other countries because the best way to strengthen that border security is to work in cooperation. But the National Crime Agency are also clear that some of the organisers are here in the UK. Some of those, for example, who do the facilitation, who organise the supply chains, who organise and help plan some of the routes, the dropping off points, the advertising, some of them are also based here in the UK. And therefore, we need the powers to be able to go after them in the UK. If we're asking France, Germany and other countries to do their bit to help go after the criminal gangs, we need to make sure we are doing everything to do our bit as well. And that's why, to be honest, I find it absolutely astonishing that the Conservatives are planning to vote against this second reading tonight, against the provisions that we're putting forward. There's no point doing yeah but, no but, yeah but, no but. The impact of his reasoned amendment is to refuse to give a second reading to this bill, putting forward counter-terrorism style powers to go after the criminal people smugglers and traffickers who have undermined border security and put lives at risk. We've seen reasoned amendments down from Reform, from the SNP as well, all of them wanting to oppose this bill, wanting to oppose the powers that we need to go after the criminal gangs. Frankly, they should all explain why they want to let down the people of this country and stand up instead for the people smugglers and the traffickers who are putting lives at risk and undermining our border security. We believe on this side of the House that we should go after those gangs because we believe theirs is a vile and illegal trade. And Madam Deputy Speaker, the bill also strengthens intelligence gathering and sharing to tackle organised immigration crime. It will make it easier for customs data to be shared with the Home Office and police, provides for data held by the DVLA on UK registered trailers to be shared with law enforcement in real time, because the House will remember the terrible case where 39 people died in the back of a trailer in Essex. So this measure will help detect attempts to smuggle people or goods into the country illegally via lorry. And it will also provide for biometric checks to be taken more easily in different locations, including from Scottish ports and evacuation routes. And importantly too, the bill also restores order to the asylum system by putting an end to some of the failed gimmicks and unworkable mess that the previous government left us with, including sorting out the chaos created by the unworkable and contradictory provisions in the Illegal Migration Act, most of them so unworkable that Conservative ministers never commenced them and never implemented them. 34 major clauses that were passed through this House but never commenced because ministers knew they wouldn't work. 16 more that were commenced in law but never operationalised because they were simply unworkable. And the chaotic combination of Clause 9 and Clause 2, which meant that anyone who arrived could claim asylum, get asylum support, get put up in an asylum hotel, but the Home Office could never take a decision on their case, so they would have had to stay forever an asylum hotel California, where you never leave, the backlog soars, and the taxpayer foots the bill. So yes, we are repealing many of those chaotic and gimmicky and broken laws, including the Safety of Rwanda Act, which then allows us to withdraw from the UK-Rwanda treaty that would otherwise cost us hundreds of millions more pounds for an unworkable scheme. I will give way finally.
Thank you, and I thank the Home Secretary for giving way. She mentions asylum hotels. The government has actually opened more asylum hotels since I've been in office. So can she give us a date when she will meet her manifesto commitment to close the last asylum hotel?
I'll just point out to the honourable member that his party's previous government opened 400 hotels. This government has already cut the cost of asylum accommodation substantially, continuing to do so, and we've also had to start clearing the backlog that was created by the previous government collapsing asylum decisions in the run-up to the election, creating total chaos and increasing the backlog as well. Madam Deputy Speaker, this bill is about restoring order to the immigration asylum system, rebuilding our border security. Immigration has always been important to the UK, but that's why it should be controlled and managed so the system is fair. Our country will always do our bit to help those who fled persecution in conflict, but the system needs grip and control, not gimmicks, not false promises. Unlike our predecessors, we won't claim there's a single fantasy gimmick that will solve the serious challenges. The gangs have been allowed to take hold for 6 years, so it will take time to loosen that grip and to smash the networks that lie behind them, but there's no alternative to the hard graft of those going after those gang networks who've been getting away with it for far too long. And there's no alternative to working with international partners on this international crime, building new alliances against organised criminals, not just standing on the shoreline shouting at the sea. So if all the other parties are serious about tackling criminal gangs who undermine our border security and put lives at risk, if they're serious about tackling crime, if they're serious about tackling criminals, and if they're serious about protecting our borders, they will support this bill tonight. The gangs don't care about borders or whether the people they exploit live or die, but we have a responsibility to the British people who rightly expect our borders to be secure and for us to go after the criminal gangs who are undermining them. And we have a moral duty to prevent further tragedies and to stop the gangs who